Hello and welcome to another Coffee with Colm, brought to you by Wigwam Business Coaching. Lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining me. He or she who collects the most no's wins. He or she who collects the most no's wins. Fact of life. You are going to have to collect more no's than yeses if you want to achieve your business goals. No question. Not everybody, I hate to burst your bubble, but not everybody in the world wants what you have, unless you're Google or Facebook or YouTube, and you're probably not Google or Facebook or YouTube. So not everybody in the world wants what you have, and therefore you're going to have to collect more no's than yeses. Yet we treat no's like they're something to be avoided. They're absolutely not. They're something to be collected and celebrated, dare I say it. Just come off a call with a guy and it was a no, and I'm delighted. Do you know why I'm delighted? Because he's finally off the fence, right? He was a sort of a maybe. Yeah, this looks interesting. And he's now a no. Happy days. He's freed up my fence, another spot on my fence to put somebody else on. So he who collects the most no's wins. My dad, Tommy O'Brien, great salesman back in the day. And he came up with this phrase, the more calls you make, the more orders you take. The more calls you make, the more orders you take. It's frighteningly simple. What he doesn't say is the more calls you make, the more no's you'll collect. But it's one and the same thing. The more calls you make, the more orders you'll take. The more calls you make, the more no's you will collect. You must collect more no's than yeses if you're going to be successful in business. And the worst place you can have people is sitting on the fence. I put a slot in my diary last week, 2-hour slot, and it was clear the fence, right? What does clear the fence mean? It means I had to go back to all the people who were sitting on the fence who told me maybe. They didn't tell me no, didn't tell me yes. They told me maybe about my product or service. And they were sitting on the fence and taking up headspace. And, I don't want them sitting there rent free. So I needed to get them off the fence. And so I made the calls and I collected more no's than yeses. Happy days. But the fence is clearer. And you know what I've been doing since? I've been filling the fence up again because I've been following my own dad's advice. The more calls you make, the more orders you take. And I'm fully expecting to collect more no's than yeses. But the more no's I collect, the more yeses I will collect by default. So he or she who collects the most no's wins. The more calls you make, the more orders you take. The more calls you make, the more no's you will collect. The more no's you collect, the more space you have on your fence. He who collects the most no's wins. She who collects the most no's wins. Folks, go out there this week and collect a whole load of no's and then report back next week. Check back in next week and see how that's gone for you. Promise you'll be energized. Promise you'll be energized. And thank you for joining me for this week's Coffee with Colm. I hope and trust as ever you got something from it. Please consider what's been shared here today and apply it into your thinking for this next week. And then very importantly, come back next week and we share another coffee together and I'll ruminate on some other aspect of life and business. Between now and then, get some great coffee, get some fresh air, get some R&R. If you spend too much time alone, perhaps in these strange times you're spending too much time alone, well then find a way of reaching out to others and spend some time with other people, even if that has to be online in the short term. If you spend too much time with people, perhaps even if that's online, well then take some time out and get to know yourself a little bit better. And then when the time is right, and only when the time is right, get your head back in the game, get organized for the week ahead, get stuck in, make next week count, collect more no's, and I'll see you here this time next week for another Coffee with Colm. Slán. I love great coffee. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.